Well, hello. Well, hello. Well, hello, guys. How are you?
Hello.
I'm under the thing again.
You're crushing yourself.
I know. You know what? This is what happens when we form Podcast Voltron when Brett's here. And I get,
okay.
I get crushed to the top of the thing. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast, now at full strength. It's good to see everybody here. If you're new to the podcast, because I'm sure that we always get new members and viewers when people follow the guests on the slipstream. What happens here is that these fine gentlemen and myself and our guests are going to talk shop. Everyone is a professional cartoonist and illustrator of some stripe. We're going to have a nice, involved conversation where you
Stripes.
I like your shirt, Mike. Where you, dear viewer, can interact with us live if you so choose. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello. If you're watching on Facebook, hello. Feel free to type into the chat room or the comments, and I will see what you're saying. If you have a question, I'll do my best to get it on. But if I don't, no tears. Let's just have a good show. Let me do my intros. Welcome. I'm Jamar Nicholas, Philadelphia's favorite son, and the Kevin Bacon of comic books.
Oh,
wow. You like that? That's right. The 6 degrees is real. Also, I am joined by my good buddy Brett Blevins. Hey, Brett.
Hello. Hi.
And also, I'm joined by my other best bud and modern master, all of you guys. Everybody's a modern master tonight. I'm just going to give everybody that blanket title tonight. Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Hello, ladies and joins.
Brett, what's going on? What's new with you? I haven't seen you around.
I've just been really busy and working. And, as I think I might have mentioned here before, I was married recently. So we're still, when you are married late in life, it's very hard to get all your junk together in one place. That's why I'm doing. So I'm still commuting back every night. And she comes here one night, I go there one night. So it's been pretty hectic, and I've been trying to wrap up this gigantic job.
Yeah. Well, it's always great to see you, Brett. And Mike, what's new with you? I know you got your hands full.
Yeah, I just turned in 5 pages of the Dark Hawk 30th anniversary special today. So I'm doing that, and then the Phantom, and lastly Judge Parker. So I will have to switch over to Judge Parker for the next half a day to get that done, and then I'll be back in Dark Hawk Town.
Oh, wow. You got a lot going on. And, I never speak for myself, but my hands are full, too. I'm in the middle of my deadline for my first book of my Scholastic deal for Leon the Extraordinary. So I'm like knuckles deep in pages right now.
So where are you? Where are you in your process? Are you all pencils or all inks or?
I'm still doing batches. So I'm doing, I just turned in like 90 pages of inks, and I'm on the next 90 of pencils. So the book's 272 pages, so I got a lot going on here.
Yeah, but 90 pages, that's impressive.
Well, thank you, Brett. That means a lot coming from you. So as you guys could all see, we all have our pedigrees, which I think will make a really exciting conversation. Let me get these things off the screen. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Clip Studio Paint. Yes, that Clip Studio Paint, the one that almost all of you guys use. And also our good buddy John Moore over at Tomorrow's Publishing, who is the publisher of Draw Magazine. I'm sure there's a special going on. Go to tomorrows.com, check them out, and make John some money. All right, cool. All right, guys, I want to get right to it. We got a big show tonight. The internet's been a titter, you guys.
What?
Because of our guest.
Well, this is a PG. This is not.
Well, I didn't say that. Tonight, guys, we have Arthur Adams on the show. Art, I almost don't want to give him an intro because, like, it's almost like everybody knows who Art Adams is. And when we did the announcement last week for the guest this week, people were like, all caps, Art Adams. How do you get Art Adams? Like, I just find that really fantastic that everybody is so excited. So I just want to get right into the conversation. Let's bring Art in, see what he's up to. Maybe we'll get an origin story out of him and let you guys catch up, because I'm sure all of you guys, your paths have crossed in the Marvel trenches. So let's bring him in. Hey, Art, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm sorry to let you know at this late date, I have to cancel. I have to leave right now.
Oh, no.
That intro. I got to leave. Hope you're all doing well.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
So, idea you just been married. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been a few months now, but yeah, thank you. Everything's going well.
Start paying attention to what's happening in the world, although I don't know why that would help at all.
I must say, Art, you've got a beautiful Santa Claus thing going there. You just look fantastic.
The reason I kept it, because I was going to shave, and my daughter said, "Oh, you look like Santa." Joyce, my wife, unfortunately hates it with a burning passion, so I don't know how long it's going to last.
Can you just shave like one side? Like the side you can kiss with this side, and then this side you can be Santa?
Well, because one of the reasons I have a beard, my little beard, is because I have no chin. So my wife didn't know this when we first got together, and then one day I decided to shave it off in chunks. And unfortunately, the first chunk I shaved off, no one who's listening to this wants to hear this story. But here,
they want to hear all of it. Go for it. Yeah.
I shaved off the chin first, and I looked like a catfish. I looked like some sort of tank cleaning fish. It was not a good look. My wife said, "Grow it back as fast as possible."
He's like a science fiction character. You just have those. Well, you always draw science fiction characters with weird hair thingies.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it is funny that, before COVID, that, a lot of people just started growing beards just as a thing. And now I don't know if it's all mixed together, if people have COVID growth or they were doing that anyway.
Well, I kind of had it going on, and then I heard someone refer to it as a neck beard, and for a couple of days I was like, don't want the neck beard. That doesn't sound good.
No, that's not a good look.
Bad thing. But we'll see how long it lasts. Probably not too much longer. I think I'm gonna have to. This is from not having gone outside for about 3 months, around other people.
Our good buddy J. Robert Dean says he could sympathize. He shaved his beard once, and his wife avoided him for weeks. That's great.
Yeah. Soon you'll be able to rival Walt with your beard.
Oh, Walt's beard is fantastic.
Pretty substantial, I know.
He's like a ZZ Top beard.
No, I trimmed it a little bit because on the sides I had like nice curls. So I was like, am I Viking, wizard, or werewolf? But this part the werewolf part.
Or you could just go for the Asimov, just leave those big mutton chops.
Do I look like the Amazing Randy or Darwin?
I got to say, I break the chain once again. Everybody has alliterative names except Jamar. He's always messing it up. Look at that.
You do what you can.
Well, mistakes were made. Yeah. So, Mike, do you want to start us off with a round?
Oh, well, why doesn't Brett? Because Brett's actually known Art for a long time. Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Art, but I think the first time we met was at a convention in San Jose, very early, like 1982 or 83.
Fairly possible. I mostly remember having met you at Walter and Louise's house or apartment. I think we had dinner one night.
Yeah.
And I remember that more clearly than a convention. But you could be entirely right. It could have been a convention.
I'm pretty sure you and Mike were there. Mignola were there together.
We were almost always at conventions in those days. We were living like in the apartments side by side. So
yeah, and I think that's the first time we met. And I remember really being knocked out by the stuff you showed me then. So.
Was that before he was working at Marvel, or?
Right, it must have been right about the same time. That was my first job. The first job I did was that Dark Crystal movie adaptation.
Oh, right. That's right. And that was inked by Coletta.
Yeah.
Inking is going too far.
Yeah.
I didn't want to start things on a bummer because I remember seeing your pencils and they were so beautiful. And then I saw the book and I was like, he'll do okay eventually.
Yeah, well, Rick Bryan inked the backgrounds. That did help. But what I remember was that I was living in Nevada, so at that time, Marvel kept sending me to all these conventions in California because I was the cheapest airfare.
Yeah, yeah. Right. It was. No, I remember now. You're right. It was San Jose. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and back then you had this big red hair. I remember that.
I did. I had on. It was very bright. No, my daughter has no. Well, of course she wouldn't. She never saw it like that. No, I remember that convention. I saw your artwork, and I really liked it. And then I showed some of my artwork to Wendy Peeney, and she hated my artwork, and she let me know it.
Wow.
Wow.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't hold grudges.
I think you've.
Either, so it's all right.
I think you've overcome that negative reaction by now, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Thank you. I feel better. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, I remember. Was it just one dinner at Walton Weezy's, or were several? I don't remember.
It might have been more than one because I was visiting them. I was visiting them pretty often when I would go to New York, and I imagine you were making that same trip. I mean, they were so fun. They were so fun and so great to hang out with.
Still are.
I know.
Yeah.
Now, Brett moved, but you did not move to New York when you started getting work, right? Did you stay?
I started working right at the beginning of Federal Express, and so it was never necessary. I got into comics just at the time when it was not necessary to be in New York anymore. I mean, I knew there was other people who had who were living in other places, but I'm horrified when I hear stories about Kirby being in LA and sending, a whole penciled book or 2 penciled books in one envelope. This was horrifying. Not Federal Express. Just going to the post office, putting it in a manila envelope, and like, goodbye.
Go to Stan Lee, and watch it disappear. Yeah.
Well, that would have been even the early days of crappy Xeroxes too. He wouldn't even have been able to get really good copies.
Exactly. He would have been in such bad shape. But yeah, so I started. It was right at the beginning of copy stores and FedEx.
Wow.
So, and what was your first job?
First job for Marvel was Long Shot.
Okay, so that was
like a year before. Joe Rubenstein had shown my samples around Marvel, and I think it was Denny O'Neil said I could try out something for a book they were doing then called Bizarre Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and Linda Grant was his assistant at the time, so I got a call from Linda saying, "Well, just send in something. We'll see if we can use it." And so I don't know how I used to do it, but I think I wrote and penciled. Well, it was layouts, but very, very super tight layouts. Just a 3-page little thing for Bizarre Adventures. And I sent in the layout and the script, and I got a call from Denny saying, "Oh, we like the script. Who would you like to draw it?" I was like, "No, that's not what I'm here for. I only wrote this because I had to write. I want to draw comics." And he's like, "All right, well, go ahead and see what happens." And I sent in the pencils, and then Joe inked it. And I didn't do a good job, and Joe might have done a good job, but I don't remember being particularly keen on what he had done. But anyway, it got turned in, and I was super excited because it was my very first Marvel job, 3 pages. And I called up Denny and said, "What do you got for me next?" And he said, "Don't worry, we'll call you." So fortunately, that book was canceled before mine could be published. So no one knows about those 3 pages. So I did that when I was probably 17.
Wow.
Maybe just 18. And so then I did more samples over the course of a year and worked at Round Table Pizza because you gotta have pizza money. So I figured go directly to
the Fellowship of the Pizza.
Yeah. And so I did that for about a year. Then I did some new samples and sent those. And fortunately, Annie Nocenti and Carl Potts and Al Milgram found them. And I think at that point, Annie had been shopping around the script for Long Shot for about a year to everyone. And everyone had said no. I don't know if Brett, if you'd had a chance to say no to it, but almost everyone else had.
I don't think I said no to it, but I think I was just so buried at the moment that I couldn't even
probably that too.
Bringing something on.
I think that was probably the case with most people, but the script was an odd one because it was a superhero whose power was luck. I was like, I have no idea how to draw that, but it's working for comics, so I'm doing it. I'm just, whatever it is, I'm going to figure out how to do it. I'll take that job. And unfortunately, that worked out okay.
Now, how did you go about, it's always interesting to me when we go back in time since now there's a whole industry of like how to be a comic book artist and a million videos and all this stuff. How were you training? How were you, bringing yourself up? Well, how were you studying?
Well, so I was going to conventions. I'd probably been going to conventions for a year or two, asking questions from other professionals. Steve Lealoa was great. It was Steve Lealoa is living in San Francisco, then and now, and he's, Steve is an awesome guy. Couldn't be nicer, and also super smart. Knows what he's doing. So he was a source of a lot of information. I had my Willie Pagani How to Draw book and my Andrew Loomis book, and of course I had my Marvel How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which I actually don't find to be particularly useful for learning how to draw comics. But I was a big comics fan, since I was a kid. So I had set aside right next to me. I had one pile of about 10 books that I thought were really good. And then I had, and that would have been like Barry Smith, Red Nails, various Michael Golden stuff, various Walter Simonson stuff, and some other guys like I love Gil Kane and John Buscema for some inked by some people. So I had a pile of stuff that I thought was really good. Then I had a pile right next to it about the same size of comics that I thought were terrible. I won't read any of those. But I would study those to see what I thought, why those didn't work, and why the other ones did. So and it helped. I was living at home, so I didn't really have many distractions. I mean, living at home with my mom and dad.
Right.
Because I was only like 3 years old.
That's very analytical for a very young person. I mean, comparing the bad to the good, I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, maybe.
What was in the bad pile?
He just isn't going to say.
Come on. This is pencil to pencil. We tell it like it is.
All right. It was Mike Manley work. All right.
Ah, good.
You walked right in.
Yo.
I'm glad. I scared you into being good, kid.
That's fantastic.
Because I think it's everybody has those of us who got in before there was the industry like there is now of how to get in, especially like in the last 10 years. It's interesting to me to find out how everybody sort of finds their way through, because there wasn't if you lived in New York, you could go in, show your work, maybe be an apprentice, the industry was there. But if you were like a lot of people, like I was from Michigan and you guys were from the West Coast. So it was not, although I suppose if you were in LA, there might have been more of a.
I don't think so. I guess Kirby was there, and I guess there was a couple other fellas, but no, they were still having to use the mail just like everybody else. And the world's changed. LA wasn't what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go to San Diego and take your stuff around and do that, or?
The first year I went to San Diego was right after I got hired because that was too expensive. I couldn't afford to do that. So the first time I went to San Diego, Marvel brought me out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So did you go out to New York when you got hired? Did you go out to when you were doing long shot, or did you do it all long distance?
Marvel was awesome back then. Brett probably remembers this, but I would call up Annie or Wheezy and say, "Hey, I want to come to New York," and they'd say, "Okay, we'll get your tickets, we'll get your hotel, we'll have a couple of meetings, just a couple of lunch meetings." I was so thrilled. Because I was still a kid. I think I just turned 20 first time I visited New York. I would just sit around the Marvel offices all day, and I would just be a fly on the wall. At some point, Annie and Wheezy would have to stop themselves from talking because they would forget I was in the room. Because I was just observing everything.
Did you meet any luminaries on your trips out?
Not that I recall. But I was pretty starstruck by it all. So anyone who had a name in comics, if your name was in the indicia, you were a luminary. So I met lots of colorists, and I was thrilled to meet the colorists. And I was meeting all the editors. And at that point in Marvel, also lots of the editors were also writing a lot of the comics. So there was that. But no, most of the main people I was hanging out with was like, I think I saw a couple of guys very briefly. I think I saw Barry Smith for like 3 minutes one day. And then, but mostly I was just spending time with Walter and Weeze and Terry Austin and whatever other folks would come over and visit them at dinner time. You know, so that was always great.
At Marvel in those days it was like an ongoing party. I mean, it's kind of
It
amazing.
really was. Yeah, it really was.
So much wonderful stuff was coming out, but it always seemed like everybody was just there to have fun.
Well, I think it was probably easier then. I mean, things for Marvel were going really well. I think they were bringing in money that they weren't used to having. And I mean, it's weird to imagine a day that there was like one X-Men comic book, right? Like I was there when they were like starting to come up with New Mutants, and everyone was against it. And like Chris was like saying, no, we should not have one more X-Men book. We have to make it, you know, at least a little bit different. And now, I mean, they're just everything is multiple versions of everything else. I don't know how anyone who collects comics can do it anymore.
Yeah, because they had a couple Spider-Man books. They had like Peter Parker
books. Yeah. They always had, that was both for DC and Marvel. DC had a bunch of Batman books, and Marvel had a bunch of Spider-Man books. Then everything else was just itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you work in the bullpen when you were visiting, or were you working? Or you
tiny bit. I was at that point. I would stress quite a lot working with people all around me because I was used to just working at home alone.
Right.
So having people around, and like I've been working at conventions, but you know, I mean, all of us have done it. Drawing at a convention is not the same as drawing at home.
Yeah,
it's like half brain drawing. Like you're drawing and signing, and you know, it's like
it's half brain. It can be, and especially back in those days for me, it was partly performance art because I just wanted to be funny and make people laugh. And then unfortunately I got slightly famous, and things that would have made people laugh before was making them cry. So I had to stop doing that.
So
and when I was just starting, if someone came by with a drawing that I didn't think was up to snuff, or I was just being a dick, you know, because that's entirely possible. I might say something like, "Why do you hate paper?" Right? But then at some point, I said that to somebody like, "Why do you hate paper?" And they were crushed because, you know, the guy who draws long shot doesn't like my drawing. So.
Hey, Art, I want to throw in a couple of questions from the room. I don't want them to back up. So I try to keep everything in a flow of our conversation. But this is a good one for right now. Our buddy, the notorious JRD, asks, what was it, be it a book or individual art, that was your aha moment to make you want to do this for a living? Any insight?
Well, I'll say, I don't know if this counts as insight, but it is a string of words that I'll put together. So I love Frazetta like crazy. So I was really studying Frazetta. I thought I'd try to teach myself how to paint. But at some point I realized that I just didn't have whatever Frazetta had that could make the magic on a board. But then I was discovering Kirby, and I could figure out how to draw figures looking at Kirby, because he would draw such chunky figures, you know, especially like in the mid, like later Fantastic Fours, where it was clear like you drew a hand, a forearm, the shoulder, the torso, and they were just separate chunks. Like I could figure that part out. So that was part of my figuring out how to learn how to draw for myself. But the guy whose comic made me go, this is what I want to do, was Michael Golden's Micronauts #1, which is super weird when I look at it now, because Micronauts #1 up to Micronaut, like his drawing style changed completely between issue 1 and issue 6. But issue 6 is probably the one I emulated more at the time, because issue 1 is like really, they don't have a lot in common. I don't know how to say it other than that. So I don't know what it was about that Micronauts #1, but that's the one that I grabbed a bunch of copies. I was bringing them to school, showing my friends, saying, this is what I'm going to do for a living, telling my mom and dad, this is what I'm going to do for a living. My dad was in the Air Force, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom with my, I have 4 younger brothers, so she was taking care of all of us and trying to make sure we didn't kill each other. She succeeded. We didn't kill each other. So that's good. But so I came to him, I think I was probably 15 or 16, and said, this is what I'm going to do for a living. I'm going to draw comics. And they were very supportive. They were like, yeah, we would, that sounds great. We have no idea how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like most people, even now, probably wouldn't. So they were like, well, we support that, but we want you to have a fallback plan, figure out something to fall back on. So it was a year or two later, I discovered that I loved being in plays. So I told him if comic books don't work, I'll become an actor instead. That didn't really help.
Another sure profession.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have one more, and then we'll go back to our conversation. My best bud Stu, what up, Stu? Asks Art, who are your biggest non-comic book artist influences?
Non-comic book influences. So that would probably be some weird ones. Let's see if I can remember the names. I don't think of them that often anymore, even though they're part of my makeup. So Willis O'Brien, and King Kong, his drawings for King Kong. Some of the artists who influenced him, like Gustave Doré, and there's others I'm not thinking of at the moment. Arthur Rackham stuff, I love that stuff. Those I was certainly looking at a lot of that stuff when I was a kid. Franklin Booth for all that really intensive drawing. But I discovered, I don't know if we count him because I discovered him through my the big Bernie Wrightson book. So
yeah.
It all connects, right? Those would probably be the big ones I would think of at the moment.
Okay. Right.
There's certainly others like Rodin. Not the monster, but the artist.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to throw one more in because it fits. JRD asks again, do you feel that your love of the Universal monster films was as influential on your storytelling as much as it was your individual character style?
Oh, I think that's probably very much true. When I draw the Hulk, I hear Boris Karloff's monster's voice in my head. I don't hear like a big, So yeah, I think that probably. I mean, those were certainly very huge for me, and it wasn't just those. It was also Ultraman and Godzilla films. So I mean, all the Toho stuff. I love. Like I was just listened to a YouTube reading of William Hope Hodgson's. What is it? The Voice in the Night, I think it is, which is the basis for the film The Mushroom People. And it's like, I love the Mushroom People. I think it's awesome. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I was certainly that's one of the things I don't put in my work quite as much anymore because the companies aren't that keen on it anymore. But certainly in my old comics, I was always putting in references for Universal monsters or cartoons, like putting in Popeye or Gumby or whatever odd bit of nonsense I wanted to put in the background. And they never had any. I think the only one they ever had a problem with was in the New Mutants, or maybe it was in the X-Men Annual, and they were in Asgard, and I don't even know what I was thinking, but I just decided in the middle of Asgard, in a big shot. It's not like there was no fooling around on it. He wasn't just in the background. It's a big shot of one of the heroes standing next to Hagar the Horrible. It wasn't like he was drawn like, oh, let's do a realistic version of, or my Arthur Adams version of Hagar the Horrible. It was just straight up Hagar the Horrible.
That's fantastic.
And Marvel's legal department said, you can't do that one.
That's great.
So what do you do? Have to change the beard, or do you have to splice in
on a standard crappy Asgardian guy? Yeah, I think they didn't mind Warlock being Godzilla or the Starship Enterprise or any random G.I. Joe toy, but Hagar the Horrible was one step too far.
Wow. I think it's interesting, the influences that you mentioned, because I think they're all whimsical and romantic at the same time. There's a common thread, I think, through a lot of that stuff. The monsters are always very sympathetic. They're not mean or evil. I mean, even Godzilla, who just constantly trashes the place. He's not mean, you know, at least not in the earlier versions of Godzilla.
No.
I don't know what he is now. What do you think he is?
He's still a gigantic monster, but no, I was never keen on like the maniac slasher kind of films.
Mm-hmm.
Those didn't do anything for me.
Texas Chainsaw's not your thing?
I think it's really well done and scary, but no, I don't. It doesn't hold the same charm for me. You know what I mean? It's like I can admire. Like one of the things I thought I might do if I wasn't going to become a comic book or artist or an actor, but maybe special effects or you know, do because again, Willis O'Brien was certainly I loved Willis O'Brien, and you know. I'm not thinking of his full name now, but Pierce, what's his name? Pierce, who did the makeup for all the classic universe.
Jack Pierce? Was it Jack Pierce? Yeah.
And then like you know, that's Rick Baker. I was super into Rick Baker. So I thought those were things I might do.
You lived in the right state for it, because just a little bit, you know.
That's right. It was still. I mean, it was still far away, and it was still a completely alien idea. But I was so full of myself that I was just going to do whatever I was going to do. I think I would have done okay at it.
That's interesting, because my old high school buddy John Knoll ended up being the head of ILM, and he and his brother were two people behind Photoshop. And like I wanted to get into comics, and he wanted to get into special effects. And he worked on films together. He actually built a full-size Galactica with all the fiber optics and everything. And at that time, the business was at that stage where if you, Arthur Adams, showed up at you know, John Dykstra's place and you were a nice guy, they say, here, you know, do something or whatever, because he was much more approachable then.
So I had built. So I was also crazy into building and painting models. So I had built and painted and put lights in a Millennium Falcon model.
Oh, wow!
My dad actually took that. He knew one of the guys who was because my dad was really into you know what U-control airplanes are. The thing where you're holding a wire. You're holding a handle with wires connected to the plane, and you just stand in a circle, and the plane goes around and around and around. But the guys who loved it were crazy for it. And my dad would build, like his proudest one, well, the ones us kids like best, was a flying outhouse. So he built like a little, you know, an outhouse, put wings on it and a tail and an engine, and it flew. It would go around in a circle because you know that's how that stuff works. So he knew one of the guys who worked at ILM, building models, was one of his U-control pals. And so my dad brought to him that I built at the Millennium Falcon. Of course, my dad broke it along the way. But he took it to show it to him. Said, "Oh yeah, you can just have him come by, and we can get him some work." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to work on comics because I got that going now."
Yeah, it's funny because I enjoyed doing that too, and I enjoyed building models and everything. And there's something about taking your drawing and making it 3D kind of a thing. Do you sculpt at all? Do you ever like sculpt any of your stuff?
Really
or
sculpting it, it's like so many, like painting and sculpting is. I mean, yeah, my wife lost me for about 2 or 3 months because I decided I was going to sculpt, and so it meant I wasn't working at all on things that would help actually pay for the house. And fortunately, where we lived at the time was relatively inexpensive. And so I just spent a month or two just sculpting, and I really liked doing it. Then had to get back to doing real work. So that's how I seem to keep doing things with painting as well. Where I'll take a couple of years off from doing it, and then like get a bug and do it for a little while, and realize I have to get back to real life. If that's what we're calling all this stuff, I have to get back to that.
Wow, yeah. So what were you sculpting? What did you make?
So we sold it somewhere. Who ended up selling that? Randy Bone might have sold a few for me. A Godzilla. I sculpted a Godzilla. I was actually supposed to have sculpted one of Randy Bone's busts, but I flaked on that one as well.
Out of Super Sculpey?
Yeah, I like the Super Sculpey. I never graduated onto any of the other fancier materials, but I thought the Super Sculpey was pretty good.
Do you still have a kit and all your stuff in case the
Well,
bug gets you?
Since if a new Star Trek set kit comes out, I'm buying it. I have a couple of boxes of Sculpey within sight of where I am right now. I haven't touched in ages, but I have all my tools nearby. I'm supposed to be starting another project soon that has some monsters that I have to make up. I was thinking I may take a little time and try mocking up something so I can make up something crazy looking and know what it looks like from more than one angle.
Yeah. A lot of guys did that. James Gurney does that. He would sculpt stuff for Dinotopia, and Corbin did that too. He would sculpt stuff.
No, he totally did. Yeah, that's probably Corbin is probably where I was thinking about the artist Rodin, not the monster.
So how did you learn technique too? Because I'm interested. It's one thing to draw, but like, how did you learn about inking and pens and things like, did you?
Yeah. So when I started, I was inking pretty much anything, right? I'm talking about started. I'm talking about like 16 or 17, right? So I was inking with. They didn't have such good pens as they have now. These, they don't like these things didn't exist yet, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I was using ballpoint pens, and I think I taught myself to use a crow quill because I think I'd heard you were supposed to use a crow quill. So I'd learned how to do that. And it wasn't great, but I was pretty good at it. But then there was some dude who used to go to conventions all the time in the Bay Area who he's disappeared. He's one of those guys who was just around for a little while. But for some reason, both Mike Mignola and I thought this guy knew how to do things. I have no idea why we thought this, but we just for some reason thought he knew how things were supposed to be done. And he told us that if you want to be a real professional comic book artist, you had to ink with a brush. I was like, well, I don't think that's true. I've heard that's not what Terry Austin does. But again, information wasn't easily available at that time, right? So I went and I bought myself a nice brush and I learned how to ink with a brush. I worked really hard for a year, so that's probably I would have been like between 17 and 18, and I got my brush and my ink, and I really learned how to ink with a brush, and I got to be pretty good at it. And then I finally met Terry Austin. He said, "No, I never use a brush." I was like, "Well, fuck that. I'm not using that anymore." but over the course of having learned how to ink with a brush, I'd learned much better hand control, but much better motor skills. So I had a much better touch with the pencil and with the crow quill and with whatever tool I was using. So that was super helpful, having at least trained myself to be able to use a brush, right? So yeah, I guess it was just practice, right?
And you never used a rapidograph or something, or?
I got the rapidographs. I never liked them. They were always constantly clogging and constantly needed to be cleaned, and I'm not a clean dude. So I hated them. So as soon as they started, Al Milgram, can't remember the name of these pens, but there was just a standard. It was like an earlier, slightly better felt tip pen, and Al figured out a way to pull off the cap on it and rinse out the felt, and then he would drip black ink into it. So I started doing the same thing. Which there was issues with that, but it was still a lot better than the rapidograph. I hated those rapidograph so much.
Was it the Alvin? Was it an Alvin?
Oh, those. Yeah,
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't recall.
The first markers the first ones I remember the cartoonists using were called pen sticks, STIX.
Oh, the Alvin pen sticks. They were like black, little
Yeah.
kind of like thin markers. I remember those. Yeah.
They turned purple over time. So
there was another one where you didn't have to change the ink that I started using, and those were a weird one. They were a black pen, but it had a highlighting marker on the end. Right. But I inked all of the first Gumby comic I did with one of those, and yeah, that's whenever I see pages come up with that, I feel bad for whoever bought them because they're turning pretty light purple. Yeah.
I have a couple of tech questions. Our long-standing friend, Eternity Forever, which you love, I love it. I love the internet names. Your style has a great deal of texture art. Did you ever find it difficult to meet a deadline, or did you have a great deal of lead time to finish your projects?
Yes and yes. Yes, sometimes it does get to be difficult, but I do it pretty fast. When I'm doing that kind of stuff, I'm also that kind of stuff I'm not necessarily worried about because I'll pencil everything pretty tightly, but not super tightly. So I'm doing stuff in the ink that like no inker would know I want it done, right? So I'm just doing little bits and dashes. So yeah, sometimes it does take a little too long. There's times like I'm working on I just finished a cover that no, it's not quite done. Where I was like, it's an Ultraman cover, and all the Ultraman covers he fights a big giant monster. But in this one, he's not fighting a giant monster. He's just surrounded by hundreds of people.
Wow.
Are you kidding me?
Wow.
So that one did take a little bit longer.
That's just a stamp, right? You just stamped.
Maybe next time.
Now I noticed that that's larger. So when you work on your own, like I have a creature page by you that I bought from Terry. That was larger. So when you work on your own, do you like to work larger rather? Because I'm doing this Darkhawk thing now, and the pages are actually smaller than they used to be, and with the bleed, it's even smaller than it. It's like I feel like I'm working on a postage card.
So, what I discovered a while ago is that, so you can't tell on this, but that's the reason I work on the bigger paper. I first measure out a standard size cover. It's 10 by 15. But for whatever reason, I almost inevitably draw my figures too big. So I was finding I spent years just erasing figures and redrawing them so I could get them to fit. But then at some point, I realized that I was selling my original artwork for way more than Marvel or DC is paying me for. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make the page bigger. And I'm not going to worry too terribly much about the dimensions. They know what their dimensions are. They'll trim it to however they need to trim it. Let them figure it out. So sometimes that means like the published thing has some weird layouts, but I've moved beyond worrying about it. So on that was originally meant to be 10 by 15 because I knew I was going to draw a lot of people, and I didn't want to go nuts. And then I went nuts anyway.
Right. Right.
I think when I drew the Ultraman figure, he was just slightly too bigger than I wanted, but I didn't want to have to keep redrawing him. I mean, even when I say redrawing, it means I still redrew the thing 5 or 10 times, right? I drew the figure and I was like, oh, that's terrible, erase. And so I was finally okay with that one.
I think that's important to mention to people too, because a lot of younger artists feel like if you erase, oh man, that's like serious bad thing if you erase something, you know?
No, I spend more time erasing that. I love that old, was it Kirby and who's Simon? That Kirby was working on something and he started erasing it, and Simon looked over him and said, "You're paying us for penciling, not erasing."
There's some size questions in the room I want to get to real quick. So our buddy Gar Hyde asks, do you work the same size for every piece? And then also Stu asks, what is the largest size piece you've done?
So no, I don't always work the exact same size. They're usually pretty close. Let's see if I have an example. So you saw that one. I was just a moment, people.
He's going into the treasure chest.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for your questions. I see them all. I'll do my best to get them on.
So you saw the one I just had up.
Mm-hmm.
This is a King Kong that I just did. It's also not standard size, as you can see. Oh, there we go.
Other way.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a little odd. And then this Godzilla, which is slightly bigger. But you can see that's a pretty big.
Wow. What kind of paper are you using?
It's just Strathmore Bristol.
Okay.
Yeah. And then these, but because they're close-ups, they're a little shiny. They're much smaller. They're on that probably that same paper you were talking about, Mike. That's that it's a manga paper, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I do interiors, and I'm actually thinking I'm going to be doing interiors on a job coming up soon. I'm going to be drawing those smaller for the interior pages. But the covers, I like having a little more room. But again, it depends on what it is. Oh God, I can show you another one if you want.
Yes, please. No one's going to say no.
So this one I just started doing for Marvel.
Wow.
Started it for myself. That's why I decided I wanted to draw a bunch of Ultraman monsters. But this is all on smaller paper and just taped together. And just me being a maniac.
Yeah, beautiful.
And,
Yeah.
And what are you inking with these days, Art, for these pages?
These are almost all of the Pigmas.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just
Really? Now you must burn through a lot. You must must buy like 900 at a time or something.
Yeah.
Like all the Pigmas go to your house.
Seems that way. I never I use them enough so that they're not dry, but the tips are kind of funky. So I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I have hundreds of them set aside. I should find something to do with it because I feel funny throwing them away because they're not usable, but they're not very comfortable to use on this stuff now.
Now, I think that the Pigmas are not as juicy as they used to be 10 years ago.
Yeah, you know what? I think they're better than they were 10 years ago. Maybe
you think so?
Maybe they just like me better. Because I think they're better than they used to be. But these are the ones I used to prefer, the Statler pigment liners.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones I used to prefer. But if I could get them easily, I might use them more. But they're a little more difficult to get than the microns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, microns are everywhere. And then we're using. You ever use the pit pens?
Yeah, the Faber-Castell.
I didn't care for those. I didn't care for those at all. Now I found I can't. Yeah, I didn't like the feel of them.
That's
mentioning the size again.
Go ahead, Brett.
Mentioning your sizes, I remember. I can't remember which show it was. It might have been San Jose again in the last few years. I saw you with a piece that was all maybe every Marvel character, but it was as big as a barn door.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, the size of the piece. Good. Thank you for reminding me, Brett. I didn't. So yeah, the biggest one was I wanted to put all on one piece of paper. Was 8 connecting covers for a Marvel series. It ended up there was a problem with the cropping, so I actually had to extend the artwork on the sides by a couple inches. So I think that one finally ended up being about 48 by 32 in that range. Yeah, it was a pretty crazy big piece. Yeah, that's the original Sin one. Let's see if I have that. No, I don't.
Yeah. You faked me out. All right.
Do you when you were doing something like that? Do you do the layout real small? Do you plan it out, or you just kind of wing it?
It depends from piece to piece. In that instance, I believe I did a pretty tight sketch that they approved, and then I got a Xerox of that, and then light boxed it onto the paper.
All right. So you don't have a Xerox machine yourself?
I don't. No. Our house is already cram packed full of stuff. But having a Xerox machine sounds like a good idea. I think Walter has one. Do you have one?
I have one now. Well, I have one of those. Everything's all together in one scanner, fax machine, printer, whatever. But actually, the first thing I did with I did an issue of the Transformers, and I got a royalty check from that in 1984.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty big royalty check. So the first thing I did was go buy a guy's Xerox machine because the guy in town was just a pain in the ass. He charged us 50 cents, and he Xeroxed it crooked. Well, you still got to pay for it, So
the place I would go to, they would let me Xerox myself. Yeah.
No, he wouldn't. No, he had to be in control, But I realized that it paid for itself between using the light table, doing layouts or whatever. So that was probably the biggest expense I had, long before a computer, and it definitely paid for itself.
No, that's a good idea. I should have done that.
I have a
Do this liveless life. Next, I'll go back in time and I will fix that.
here's a question from the room. Art Mayra asks, who's a new fan of ours. Hi guys, hope all is well. Smiley face Art. Looking back at your early years as an artist, Art, how do you think your style has evolved through the years?
So it's hard for me to judge, of course.
Yeah,
I don't really in a course answer, but it's hard for me to judge because I do genuinely try to get better, but sometimes I think it's kind of gross. But sometimes I think I think of having an art style as polishing a turd.
mm-hmm.
You kind of start out with what you make, and you're just trying to keep get that thing as good as possible. So even if you just we don't need to pursue this too far, but I am always trying to get better, and sometimes I think I'm doing okay, and there's other times I don't know what I'm thinking about, and also it's one of those things that's hard for me to judge because I know there's one of the things I think fans or people who like a different artist's work, sometimes the first thing they see of that artist is the greatest thing that they remember from that artist. So there's for me, there's some people who think Long Shot is the best thing I ever did. There's more people who think New Mutants Special is the best thing I ever did. There's other people who think the Fantastic Four comics I did with Walter are the best thing I ever did. And there's other people who think Gumby is by far the best thing that I ever did. And so again, I'm always just trying to get better. And so I'm not necessarily thinking about evolving my own style in any particular way. I'm just trying to not embarrass myself mostly.
Well, I think every job offers you a challenge and an opportunity to try something different. I mean, even if you're drawing Fantastic Four and then you're drawing Batman or what, I mean, you might have like more architecture or you try to draw hands better. Maybe there's more hands in that one or whatever, I think your work is more, to me, is more nuanced and textural than it was even 15 years ago.
I think that's probably
it seems like you were more influenced at some point by like Mobius and things like that in a way.
Mobius, he's one I don't mention much, but Mobius was in that pile of guys who I thought were good. There was Mobius in there was Corbin in there. So yeah, he's certainly an influence.
Yeah, and that guy was so prolific, just like you. I mean, you seem like you're constantly doing. I mean, you're always working.
I am always working. That is true. I sometimes wish that I was, in fact, because as my wife will say, as Joyce will say, it's not that I'm slow, but I do erase a lot. And these covers that I've been doing, as you see, they are bigger, so they're basically like doing 2 pages, right?
Yeah.
They're generally pretty chock full. So, yeah, it seems like things are going pretty well work-wise. I have trouble thinking of myself as being prolific. Just when I see there's other artists who produce so much stuff. I mean, there's guys who are doing Marvel specials featuring characters they're associated with, and then newspaper strips on a regular basis, and I don't know how those guys get that much work done. That's crazy.
You don't get it from the table. I'm still a bachelor, so
Oh, I have another one. I have another question. Since we're talking about textures and techniques, EJB checks in and says, Art, your backgrounds are wonderful, so technical and detailed, but do you ever get lost in those extensive perspective grids? Or maybe even to kind of unpack that a little bit more, Art, is how do you keep track of where you're going on a page when you have so much detail?
don't recall ever really having much of a problem with that. Well, I do sometimes do pretty complicated perspective grids, but I just use thumbtacks for my vanishing points, right? And I always and as you see, I'm drawing on bigger boards, so if my vanishing point is well off the paper, I just draw lines across the whole paper, so I know how to place my thumbtack again if I need to. But it's really it's no more complicated than that. It's these thumbtacks go through my pages all the time, and then I have a very I have my straight edge, and it's really not that difficult.
You must have a pretty big desk then if you're working on those.
I do. It's not quite 5 feet across, but it's something like that. It's probably about 5 by 3. Yeah.
I would like to say here that Art doesn't think it's that complicated because that's his vision. He sees it so clearly in his mind. But sometimes I saw a job. I don't know the story behind this. I'm sure you can fill it in. Someone had just bought all these originals. I think, again, this was in San Jose in recent times. It was a Batman story that was still in pencil.
Yeah.
In the rain. And it was so stunningly gorgeous that I wanted to run off with it to a Xerox place somewhere. But it's constantly in the rain in Gotham City, and all the panels, in every panel, all the rain is in perspective. Every line of rain is on the grid, falling in the right direction. Just an astonishing amount of planning and careful work.
Yeah. That's one of those jobs that I'm thrilled that people like it. It's one of those that I know I overdid it. I went totally nuts. There's a reason that job will never be finished. So I was putting so much into that, and I knew I was being crazy, but it's just one of those. I don't know if you guys have any of this, but when Adam West Batman was on, I was the little kid with a towel around my neck and the mask on and running around the house, going Batman. So Batman is a difficult one. It's been done. So I'm a lot more comfortable with him now. Either I figured out what I'm doing with him, or I just gave up. But at that time, I mean, the plan on that book was I was going to follow up with Jeff Loeb and I were going to do 6 issues after Frank and Jim Lee did their 6 issues, and they were doing such a great job. I was like, oh, I don't want to look like a jerk, right? And I don't want my Batman to look like, it's Batman. Who cares? And every artist is different. It's gonna be however you draw it, right? But I love so many different Batmans. Like I love Neil Adams' Batman. I love Frank Robbins' Batman. I love Frank Miller's Batman and Mazzucchelli. There's so many, and Bruce Timm's. There's been so many really great artists on Batman. I wanted my Batman to stand out, and I was grinding on those pages, and I looked at them later. And it's like, this book is almost unpublishable. It's so tight. There's no way I could have maintained that for 6 issues because every single freaking page, every single panel had cityscapes and backgrounds and like chimney texture or not chimney, brick patterns and textures everywhere, and then the rain, which I think it was only supposed to be in the first issue, but it was supposed to have rained in the whole first issue, and I was like, this is cool. Yeah, Batman dripping wet. That looks really cool. This is going to take for freaking ever.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Jeff got fired. It was all my fault. I'm sorry, Jeff. It's my fault. It would have been a good book.
Oh,
I put a lot of good work into it.
Kind of moving sideways a little bit, our good buddy Dino Haspel's in the building. And Dean asks, did you ever visit Chaikin and Simonson at Upstart? Or
I did.
St. Kevin's and Cohen were down on?
Great. When I was there, I mean, when I visited, it was usually later in the day, so it was like right after having visited Marvel all day. And so I think Louise and I would walk over to and meet Walter there before we went back to their apartment when they were still living in New York. And yeah, that was really cool. That was funny seeing how Walter worked with his autograph there, and and he had built his Battlestar Galactica and his Cylon base star because he had worked on some of those Battlestar comics. So he had those things just hanging around the studio, and I think he might have had some dinosaur toys around. And I always appreciated a studio with dinosaur toys.
And then this one is.
But no, to back up a little bit for Dean's question,
Yeah.
I had no idea that Bill and Dennis were down the hall. I had absolutely no idea.
Huh.
So no, I did not there.
So Eternitine asked another question, and this might be the beginning of War Story Wednesday. I came up with that. Eternitine asks, would you tell us some stories about the formation of Icon in the Dark Horse days?
So you might be thinking of Legend comics, not
Legend.
Icon.
Legend. Right. Yeah.
That's okay. Dark Horse days. Gosh, what would be? I mean, Dark Horse was really great with us. They offered us a really good deal, and it was a weird one. That's because I was the Image guys were starting. I mean, Image was starting, and it was doing pretty well, and we all knew it was doing well. So everyone who's drawn comics knew that there was something that existed besides Marvel and DC. And like I knew of those guys, but I didn't really know any of them very well. But I was very close with Walter. I knew Frank reasonably well, and I'd worked with John. John's kind of unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know John very well, so anyway, I knew that there was an idea of doing your own books. But I hadn't ever really thought about doing my own book. When I got into comics, I was like, "Oh, cool! I can draw the Hulk or Batman or Spider-Man." This is, I was a kid in a candy store. The idea of doing my own thing hadn't really occurred to me too much. And so I talked to some of the guys at Image, and I knew that was an option. But I was more comfortable with some of the older guys. So I believe, I can't remember whether Frank mentioned the idea of forming a group of comic book guys. I think John was working with Dark Horse at the time too. I think one of them must have mentioned to Dark Horse the idea of us doing stuff, and also Dark Horse had been after me to do stuff for a while. They'd wanted me to work on some Alien comics, but I wasn't keen on the idea of doing any movie adaptations at that point. I didn't think there'd been many done that were really very good. I thought the only really good movie adaptation that had been done at that point was probably Walter's Alien comics, comic. That was the only one I thought that really compared to the movie at all. So no, I think it was just fortunate that Dark Horse was really open to us doing it, and we all gave it a go, and I don't think anything ever came of any of those books that came from Legend Comics. I'm kidding, of course. I mean, of course, Frank had his Sin City, and I think Mike has that Hellboy thing. That's doing pretty good, right? I think so. I mean, that's one of those. It's also one of those things where you get mixed in with real life stuff. Where I moved up to Portland for about 6 years. My girlfriend at the time had a comic book store in San Francisco that wasn't doing very well, but she was really good with customers. And Dark Horse, who has a chain of comic book stores in Portland, asked her, came to us and said, "Hey, Arthur, if you guys move to Portland, we'll give her a comic book store, and you can work on your book right here, and it'll be a lot easier." And that seemed like a pretty good idea at the time. And I liked Portland, but then I broke up with my girlfriend at the time and met Joyce, and she owned a house in San Francisco. So of course I had to move. That's only sensible, right?
Yeah.
Any stories for Dark Horse? It was just, I mean, it was work, and it was. I found, at the time, I was not very happy with my writing. I think I'm good. Mr. Simonson's blushing. I'm sorry, I got distracted there.
That's all right.
So I was not very happy with my own writing. I think I was pretty good at the banter, having characters banter, but I wasn't happy with my plotting. I think I'd do better with it now, and hopefully I will. but at the time I wasn't happy with my writing. And also my art was weird at the time. I think my 90s art is pretty forgettable. I was so impressed with a lot of stuff I was seeing from Japan, like Shiro Masamune and some various others. And then there was, I can't think of his name right now, but he was one of the artists that influenced Umberto Ramos. And also Umberto's artwork I was very impressed with. So I was trying to incorporate a little bit of their styles into my own and trying to make things a little more cartoony. And I think my art just went really stupid. Like feet got really big, and then I was drawing heads small with big faces on the heads. They're all freaky looking. It doesn't really work out. And you can see some of that in like Creature from the Black Lagoon comic, less so than in some others. I think like some of the image stuff I did was really weird looking. But the Creature from the Black Lagoon, there's some weird heads. But what I liked about the Creature from the Black Lagoon is that I'm terrible at likenesses. So I worked really hard on trying to get some of the likenesses for Creature from the Black Lagoon just right. I was working on them really hard. And then Dark Horse sent in a bunch of the pages to Universal, and they got back to me really quick. And Universal is thrilled. They're so happy because the creature looks like the creature, and they don't have the rights to any of the likenesses on any of the actors. And they were worried that the actors would look like the actors, and none of them do. It's perfect.
That's great.
Wow. How did you come up? Like, I've heard the thing where people like make a list of things that they like to come up with a, character. How did you come up with like, Monkey Man and O'Brien? Was that?
Well, Eric called up and said, "Have you ever thought about making up a comic book?" And I said, "No, but give me a minute." And then then I thought about how much I loved King Kong. And I started drawing Monkey Man and O'Brien within about a half hour. And then I looked at them about an hour later and said, "Oh shit, I've just made up Angel and Ape." Which I love.
Yeah.
But they're already a thing. But I like the idea of a big monkey and a strong girl. So that was about as much thought went into that one.
And are there any plans to do anything else with those characters, or where are they now?
There's no official plans. I plotted out about 30 issues. Plotted.
Oh.
Meaning I had ideas for other things I was going to rip off and turn into my own comic book. Because there was going to be in a few issues after the last one I did, they were going to go meet a Frankenstein monster. You got to have one of those, right? And I think I had a giant dragon living under Chinatown. I don't know if that would be I don't think that would actually work right now. I don't know if that would be very popular. Seemed like a good idea in the 90s. I'm glad I didn't do it now. Maybe the return of my giant turtle. I liked my giant turtle.
Our buddy Jamal Flores asks, Joe Mad and J. Scott Campbell are heavily influenced by you. What do you think of creators who try to emulate your style, Art Adams?
One of my parents' superpowers is I am almost always blind to this. You have to be really, really copying my work for me to be aware that you're doing it. Mm-hmm. Don't know why that is. I think the one right now who I do get confused by sometimes, not in a personal way. I like him very much, but Nick Bradshaw. There's been a couple of times people have brought his comics for me to sign, and I've started to sign them and said, "Oh, wait a minute, I didn't draw this one." So that happens occasionally, like with McFarlane early on. There's a couple of times where, like, not on any of the big pages, but sometimes on just like incidental pages of like characters just hanging out in like an apartment building or something. I would look at it and go, I don't remember having drawn this, but if you told me that I did, I guess I could believe it. But also one of the things that maybe it's connected to my being unable to immediately be able to tell influences. When I try to copy other artists, and there's times I've tried very, very hard, no one can tell that I'm looking at any other artist. I'm just very bad at copying things. Which is why I should probably do it more.
Well, it might just be that your vision is so strong, you know, because you can look at somebody like, I was talking about this the other day, you can look at somebody like Jack Kirby, especially like with his war comics or like some of those love comics, like Soul Love. You can see there's a lot of observation of real people. There's natural body gestures with the way the soldiers are carrying guns and stuff that you know he's remembering from World War II. It's a Jack Kirby drawing, but it's there's real observation in that drawing.
Oh no, it's powerful stuff. I always just prefer to think I'm probably just not sane.
Well, there's always that, right? Well, how does it feel? How does it feel to be a person, an artist? Because you mentioned the people who were like your heroes and influenced you, and now you are a person who influences people. And is that something that you ever thought about? I mean, it's like you're probably thinking about just working all the time, right? Doing your own thing.
No, it was weird the first couple of times, or when it was first starting to happen, because I mean, I was people were emulating my work when I was still pretty young. Like I was seeing people trying to emulate my work, and I was still probably before I was even 25 yet, right? So that was pretty weird. But then I got kind of used to that people like, I mean, because I'm a fan of comic books. I was for a long time, and one of the things I realized early on is that everyone is, as much as I might think they're a great artist, they're still actually a regular human being. They still have bills, bodily functions, and all the things that people have. They're still actual humans. So that's one of the things also made me think that it's possible for me to do this kind of stuff, realizing that they're just people too. This is not something, they don't have any particular magic besides whatever madness, their own personal madness is. That it's something that humans can do. And so when I was seeing, it was weird when I was being influenced by other people. And I would always tell people who influenced me as well. So I wasn't coming from a world where I didn't know that people would be influenced. I don't know why. For me, I didn't know why they weren't just looking at Michael Golden and Walt Simonson and Barry Smith and Gil Kane and Moebius and all those guys that I love. Just look at those guys. I don't know why you're looking at me, but fine. I'm the gateway. That's okay. The weird one was when I hadn't been to New York in probably about a decade, and it was the first New York show I'd done in a long time, and people were coming over, so sincere, and it was very touching and very nice. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but they're coming to me and saying how much I'd meant for their life. And at some point I turned to Joy, and this was happening over and over and over again. And at some point I turned to Joyce and said, "Do I look sick? Do I people think I don't have much longer for the world. I'm getting a little concerned." Probably just part of being an old man.
Well, it is nice to have people appreciate your
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Joyce and I went to England once, and there was a bit of a mix-up in the flight, and so we ended up our flight. The mix-up was all my fault. Let's just make that part clear. The mix-up in the flight problem was all my fault. So we ended up getting to England a bit late, and they hustled us into the hall, and there was lots of people already waiting. And everyone was like, "Oh, we're so sorry you had such a difficult trip." I neglected at that point to say it was my fault because why not? So they're all being so nice and so apologetic. And I realized that, I get to come here. You flew me around halfway around the world to get to sit in a nice chair and have people come by and tell me how wonderful I am for 2 days. It could be a lot worse.
That's true. You could have been, they could have come up and just like thrown pies in your face for 2 days, right?
You went to PyCon, right?
It would have been a weird meat pie or something, right?
You went to the wrong venue hall. This is PyCon. I meant to go to the comic book show.
Nothing against any British stuff. I love a good meat pie. It's not a euphemism.
Now, do you have pages from your first jobs? Or are you one of those? Because I know some guys would just like sell everything as soon as they would get it back. Do you keep stuff or?
I have weird stuff. So I have all the layouts from all my old stuff. I mean, like for Long Shot, I have all the layouts for that, and layouts for New Mutants and X-Men. Later on, I got to be less worried about that stuff. I would just so I don't really have much emotional connection to my artwork, so I had no problem selling it. And also, if you're going to take time to sit around sculpting things, you still got to make money somehow. So I would do that kind of stuff. So no, I don't have much of my old stuff. I've been trying to hold on to bits of stuff these days. So I have the very first 4 pages of Monkey Man that I did, and I have the first 10-page story I did, and then I have a couple of random pages. That's probably about the oldest stuff I have. I mean, I have something that's around here somewhere. It's a drawing of Howard the Duck as the Hulk that I think I drew when I was 15, but I don't think anyone wants it.
Now, Art, I have a question for you about that. Do you have an original art dealer, or do people just come to you? Like,
no, I just do it myself. I have, I mean, there's a handful of collectors, and I'm not hard to get a hold of. If someone, I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. If someone wants to send a message, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I don't always respond immediately. I'm not purposely rude. I am busy, and I'm kind of a dick. You know, so it sometimes takes a little while for me to get back to someone. But yeah, I'm pretty easy to get. Usually, I just sell stuff myself. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's good. I always admire artists that sell stuff themselves because it's really not that hard.
It's not that hard. The one of the reasons I had an art dealer for a while years ago is that I mean the market has changed radically in the last 20 years. So there was I was selling covers at some point for probably, I mean, it's still not I mean, it was still a lot of money for a piece of paper that I just doodled on. But then I found out from having an art dealer for a short time that same piece of artwork I was selling for a certain amount could sell for like 5 or 10 times what I was charging for it. And not that I was charging nothing, but it turned out it could go for a lot more. And so, I mean, it's one of the things that conventions and eBay are useful for occasionally, just to find out what the market can bear. And I mean, there's so many auction houses now as well that it's not too hard to figure out what you're worth or what you can sell your artwork for.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I noticed that you do now, maybe you always did it, but it seems like you do a fair amount of commissions. So do you say, okay, I'm going to take 5 for now? Do you like limit yourself so you don't like get 20 people standing outside your window looking in, like where's my drawing of the Hulk?
I'm not I haven't taken any commissions for quite a long time. I have a few that I owe people, but the only ones I'm kind of interested in right now are the crazy cover recreations that I do, because I charge stupid money for those, man.
That's
It's not stupid if you can get it.
well, I was just thinking when you were talking about that, because Gar actually had loaded this question up earlier about how do you limit how many you do at a con. And I know there's kind of back in the before times, there's kind of a subculture of con goers who wait outside the convention hall at 4 a.m. waiting to get online, to get in front of somebody's table, to get on the commission list.
Yeah. No, at a show, I mean, I just do the best I can. I usually at a show, depending on the length of the show, like if it's a one-day show, I'll probably only get 2 or 3 done, right? I'm charging way more than people should be willing to pay. Just, I keep telling people it's not worth it. Go buy something nice. Take your loved one out for a nice meal. Have a good evening somewhere. I'm not worth this. But I'll still take it. And then for San Diego, I'll probably take a list of maybe 10 people, but also I don't take the money. I don't take the money at the beginning. It also has helped in the last several years at San Diego. Of course, not this year or last year, but the years before, we had a really good assistant with us who would keep people in line and just let them know clearly, like, okay, you're on the list. There's no guarantee it's going to get done because San Diego or whatever convention, and there's lots of stuff going on. That's actually why I started also, because I resisted for years charging for signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll still do the first few signatures for free, but after a few
when they bring up the big giant stack,
it cuts back on the stack, because before I would just do the stack and then I wouldn't get any of the commissions done.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, okay, and San Diego, especially because San Diego, we pay for ourselves. So in San Diego, it's expensive, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for that one, that's the one I started charging for signatures for, because I was just not getting any of my sketching done because so many people wanted their signatures. So yeah, the commissions I generally, the small head ones I do, those are generally just at shows. If I have time before a show, I'll try to do some in advance, but that very rarely happens. I almost never have time before a show. I'm pretty much fighting deadlines right up until we get on the airplane or in the car to go wherever we're going.
Art, do you have any hard and fast rules about the convention weekend? Like, if you have commissions still on your lap, are you going to take them back to your hotel room and work on them, or you just leave everything, for the next day?
It can go either way. It depends.
Mhm.
Like now with especially now that we have a kid, it's very rare for me to get any sort of stuff done. And also, one of the benefits of having a significant other who's actually a nice person and a friendly person, I go out to way more dinners than I used to after each show. So I generally get very little done in the evening before. I almost never get anything done on a Friday or a Saturday night because we go out and have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. Otherwise, it's like super condensed work time when you're at a show.
And then I tell people when I'm at the shows, I don't know if anyone would believe me, but conventions are way more work for me than work is. I'm just not used to being around that many people, so that's already a thing. Not used to wearing shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So, gotta have a reason to put on my shoes.
Right. And that's something we tackle on the show once in a while, is that it's a lot more work than I think people understand on the other side of the table. And even just you're interacting with people for the first time, and say you may have gotten through the middle of the day with 90 people in front of your face wanting signatures, and you haven't eaten. But if you're right,
yeah,
if you're mean to somebody
so early on, yeah, there was one show I did in New York, and it was like right when I must have just done a New Mutants or something, but I was just super popular, and I had a line that was forever, and I was going as quick as I could. I was signing stuff, and talking to people, trying not to be a monster. And at some point, I just I gotta go. I have to go use the facility. I'll be back. I won't be gone long. 5 minutes, honest, swear. And some mom had been standing in line with her kid, and she was like done. She came over like, you have to sit back down. I was like, dude,
wow.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, there is an aspect of that where you also, or at least I can't speak for everyone, but sometimes these people, it's a big deal to them to have your book signed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk for a few minutes, and you don't want to disappoint them. So you really have to pull out energy that you didn't know was there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I don't want to be the guy who makes anyone cry.
And that's easier. That's easy to do, really, especially now. Well, we're talking about cons like we're going to one next week, and like the world's changing, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that before I kind of lock this up. But it's it's such an interesting thing about spending most of your calendar time hunched over a table, and then you're now transported in front of 100 people who want something from you. And it's not always a good interaction. Like if you're having a bad day, you can't have a bad day when you're on the floor.
And
you gotta
there's and sometimes, like one time I was at one show, and there was this younger guy who I dealt with a few times. So I had an idea he had some issues, he was kind of on the spectrum on his development issues.
Mm.
So I knew that part of his affect is that he was weirdly aggressive.
Mm.
But he's not
Right.
actually angry or bad. He's got issues, right?
Mhm.
So I learned how to deal with this guy. But I was sitting next to one of my friends who's a really nice, who's super sweet young lady, but he came over to me and started kind of shouting at me, but I knew how to deal with him. But she didn't know this, so she
Right.
immediately left her feet and got between us, and she was gonna start wailing on him. And I was like, no, it's good, we're all good. But he went away. She said, I just couldn't. He was just being really aggressive. It's like, I know, it's okay. So what I'm saying is that you do meet people who have different issues as well, and sometimes, yeah, you just find ways to deal with the different kind of people you meet at these things, and sometimes you meet a whole lot.
Well, transitioning to a new thing, how are you dealing with not going to cons? Is that freeing up your? I mean, everybody's kind of trapped at home, but are you seeing a difference in, like, I don't know, your output, or do you miss
I
it?
think more productive. I think I actually have been a little bit more productive. Last year around this time, we started a garden. I think we're going to start that again, a nice little veggie garden. So it was nice to have fresh basil for my pasta on a pretty regular basis. And we our shishito peppers grew like crazy. And we had some really, my daughter doesn't care for tomatoes, but we grew some in our garden. They were pretty good tomatoes. So
Nothing
get that. Yeah, my dogs end up liking my zucchini way more than I would have liked them to have liked, but so zucchini had a bit of a rough time. But I think we're gonna give the garden another go, and let's see. Work-wise, yeah, I think it's probably been more productive. I am feeling that I'm having like anxiety about being around a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that I'll deal with it when we get to dealing with it. I guess it's not impossible. I guess there's a couple of things that are tentatively being planned right now for December. I think that's probably about the earliest I want to be ready to do any of this stuff. Yeah, if we wanted to wait until San Diego time 2022, I'd kind of be okay with it.
Yeah. I was going through some old photos in my Google Drive, and I found these pictures of, I think it was New York Comic Con 2016 or something like that. And there were so many people just like, from the artist alley,
Oh my God, that was down below?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Off to the right.
That was so horrifying. Oh my God. Yeah, no, we told them that we weren't coming back if it was in that same hall again, because that was worse. And those guys, I mean, we have Mike Negan and all those guys who run that show. They're great guys. It's not one of my favorite shows. And it's a big hall, and it's only got like 2 entrances up into the main hall, right? There's that one big staircase that's always full of cosplayers.
Yeah.
It's really one of my least favorite shows. We love visiting New York. We love doing stuff in New York. We love everyone we see there. The venue is just a disaster. And so that one that was underground, that hall that was underground, that was the worst. That was also one of the ones that was one. Don't know why this is one of my most vivid memories of it. Was just because it was so cram packed and there's not enough restrooms, so there was long lines out the restrooms, and so finally in the men's room there was ladies standing in the men's room with mugs of beer, waiting for their chance to go use the restroom because the ladies was just done. They couldn't get in that one anymore, so they were like, the men's room is going faster, so we're going here.
Yeah, it's hard to even think about being around that many people now. Like just looking at old movies, and it's like, wow, people are probably way too close to each other.
Yeah, oh God, especially that one. Yeah, that was already a nightmare. But with just 2 doors up front, and we weren't near the back, so we didn't even know. I mean, now I know that there's loading docks back there, and so if there had been a reason for us to be evacuated, it's one of those shows that someone has to be getting paid somewhere to, like, there has to be a fire marshal that's being paid to go somewhere else, right?
He's getting all the Nathan hot dogs he can eat.
I remember at that show that Alex had a whole playroom in a suitcase that opened up on the table, and yeah, that was fun.
I think that's one of she like a lot of kids. She misses being vets. There's like she's like I'm a big girl now. I'm 10 years old, but I think there's days she misses being able to sleep in my suitcase.
You know, when you were talking about that, I think a lot of artists, not all, of course, but a lot of us are sort of naturally introverted because we're sitting here looking at this table all the time. Did you find you had to develop a technique to deal with these shows, to just deal with that many people because it's so opposite?
Well, basically, it's just diving in, and I remember I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, so it's not. I don't recall having developed a particular technique. I mean, like I talked about before about being an actor.
I'll be right back.
Good luck, Jamal. I talked before about being an actor. I can turn on, right? I can become Arthur Adams at the show, right? I can be the character and try to be, funny and gracious and polite and all the things that you would hope someone would be. Not dressed very well though. I have to work on that. But yeah, so to a degree, I'm playing a bit of a character, right? To get through it, because I get a lot of anxiety about it, and I there's days I don't want to go, so
Mentioning an actor is interesting to me because I think I'm naturally pretty shy, but I had read somewhere Cary Grant had said that he had a terrible problem dealing with his actual identity. His birth name was Archie Leach to become Cary Grant. So he would go to his own movies and say, "Gosh, I wish I could be like that guy," and that helped him separate. So I thought about that, and I thought, well, when I go to these cons, I'm going to pretend that I'm not intimidated by people, and I love talking. So you're like hiding behind this other version of yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, even from when I was a kid, I still was the class. I was the class clown, right? If I could get a laugh, that's all. That made me happy. So I just discovered Drama Club. I mean, the first play we were in was a comedy, and I was so embarrassed, so nervous, and so worried. And I was supposed to be playing like one of my schoolmates' father, so I was like trying to do an old man voice, and I had my voice had just changed. So, and I wasn't used to it yet. So my voice was really deep and booming. And our drama teacher had really been like drumming into us how important it was. Like, we're in a theater and we don't have mics, so to project your voice. And so like my voice was just booming through the theater, and I was playing this kind of funny character. So I was getting laughs like crazy. I couldn't have been happier.
Well, you also came up as fandom grew. So, because you would go to a show back in the 80s, I mean, maybe if you went to San Diego, even Chicago, my first Chicago was probably not even a quarter of the size of the show now.
God, no. Oh, yeah, totally. No, the first San Diego I went to was still it was a huge ballroom, but it was the ballroom in a hotel. It wasn't in a convention. It was the convention part of the hotel. It wasn't a whole separate convention facility, right? So even then that was the biggest in the world, and it was still comparatively you could fit probably 10 of those now into San Diego Hall. It's a much different animal now. I was talking to a while ago. I was talking to someone who'd worked at Marvel for years in different capacities. And he was lamenting that he wasn't in comics anymore. And I was like, well, what are you doing? Well, I go to conventions and I do drawings for people at the conventions. And I said, oh, are you charging for signatures? Oh, yeah, I charge a lot for signatures. And I was like, dude, you're in comics. You're just not in comics the way you're used to being in comics.
Yeah. How do you reflect upon that now? Because the business is it's so different in the last 10 years. But there's a lot more people interested in doing comics, but not superhero comics per se.
Yeah,
there's that. I think that's true. I think it's a weird time because like when I did a book, I mean, granted, this was almost 10 years ago, but it sold, I think the first issue sold like 40,000 copies, and Marvel was thrilled. I was horrified, because Longshot, when I did the first issue of Longshot, it sold, I think, 120,000 copies, and Marvel was worried they were going to have to cancel it because that wasn't enough to justify publishing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
It was 75 cents or whatever it was at the time. So it was a different time. It was also the books were returnable, so they were expecting a bunch of them to be coming back. So that makes a certain sense. But so yeah, when I was hearing that the sales that they were really happy with at 40,000, it was like a double-sized book, or it was like an extra $1 or something. It was more expensive, so they were very happy. So I worry about that, but then it seems like it has to stop at some point, but there's no evidence of it. But I've thought on this several times or over the years that I could go in like 4 different ways full time and have a perfectly satisfactory career. I could just do the shows all the time. We knew someone who was doing 50 shows a year. I could probably make bank doing 50 shows a year. It would suck for my family. It would suck for me, but I could probably do pretty well just doing shows. I mean, there's people who are doing. I could probably just do prints now or whatever, and just not just take the do that stuff. There's just different venues now that didn't even exist at when I first started. Right, it was just comics, and even though I was selling my artwork at the time, my art was more expensive than most other people's artwork at that time, because I was like seeing guys, the really productive guys, show up at a show like with a big stack of pages, and they were selling them for $1 or $5 each, and they were happy with that. And I was selling my pages probably even at the time for like $200 or $300, right? And that was pretty crazy at that time. So certainly I could just do commissions. I could just follow commissions, or I could just keep doing my covers or go do interiors. So for me, it's been a very fortunate time. Then this year I've had even more opportunities that I'm not going to discuss right here yet, but I've had several opportunities in the works beginning of this year. So we'll see.
When
if they would
I
take over the Sunday strip for Popeye, I'd be ready, man. I'd go.
I'm sure they would love to have you. I'm sure that they would love to have you. But yeah, I think it is a very odd time because there's all this, middle grade stuff like Jamar's doing. That's just exploding. All these kids, all these girls reading comics and drawing comics. Like I'm sure you would, when you were standing in line back in the day to show your portfolio, you never saw a female with a portfolio. It was always dudes.
Very rare. That's why it stuck out to me so much when Wendy Pini didn't like my work. It was like, but no, my daughter loves My Hero Academia. She's crazy for that, so she's making up all kinds of stories that are along those lines. We actually started a little comic that we want to do that's kind of in that kind of, not that universe, of course, it's theirs, and we want our own. It's kind of influenced by that sort of madness.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, like
do you read any of that? Do you guys read any of that stuff together? Do you look at the stuff? Is it interesting to see what she's into, what she discovers?
Academia, and she only kind of liked the one I prefer, One Punch Man.
Yeah.
One Punch Man is pretty amazing. And there's a couple others that I like that I can't think of the names of at the moment. And also I just a couple of years ago discovered Junji Ito, and those are pretty amazing books. I highly recommend them. He does horror comics. They're historical. He's very heavily influenced by Lovecraft. He just did an adaptation of Frankenstein that was pretty creepy, pretty freaky.
Oh wow! I might have missed this when I stepped out for a second, but
we talked about a lot of stuff when you were gone, dude.
I'll have to watch the replay, I guess.
You kind of have to be there.
Yeah, it had to be the moments pass. I wanted to ask a little bit about your foray into new tech. I'm assuming you don't. Well, I'm assuming you don't work digitally at all, or do you dabble in it at all?
No, it's not that I have any particular opposition to the
Yeah,
idea of doing it. I just
yeah.
haven't taken the time. I don't know how long it would take me to do it. When I've talked to other professionals, they've said it's taken a month or two, and that seems. I'm just filled with stress at the idea of learning how to do a new thing over the course of a month or two.
Yeah.
And also having spoken to other professionals, there's some that have said that has increased their work output, and others have said that it's made no difference whatsoever. That they're working at about the same pace, and so the idea of working at the same pace and not having a piece of paper that I could sell in emergency is also quite stressing.
Yeah, or like was it a couple of weeks ago when the pen on my thing went out? I had a whole 4 or 5 days where I couldn't work because I could do the one strip I still do traditional, but the other strip that I do all digital,
yeah,
and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Pardon?
Which one do you do digital?
I do Judge Parker all digital.
Okay.
And right now I'm doing the Phantom half digital because my assistant can't come over because of the pandemic. So she would come over and ink the backgrounds here in the studio. And sometimes I would lay them out and she would draw them. But because of the pandemic, she can't come over. So I still pencil it. And then I send it to her and she inks the backgrounds digitally. And then I ink the figures digitally. But I would prefer to do it all traditional because I also, like you, I can sell the originals. I can't really sell the originals of Judge Parker. There's no real fan base. So one of the reasons I switched to doing digital is that after, I've been doing it 11 years now. I just had this huge stack of stuff that I can't.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's a weird one. Yeah.
One thing you mentioned earlier that is probably the main value digital work has for me. I use it to lay things out, and then
I've heard
trace.
A lot of people, and then trace off. Yeah.
And trace off, and I have the same problem where I draw things the wrong size. So now I just grab it and shrink it to the right size. Don't have to erase it and do it.
I have thought about that. I thought it would be useful if I was drawing something that I had to do, like if I was, God forbid, not that I don't love Star Trek, but the idea of drawing a Star Trek comic book. I figured I would do, if I had to do something like that, I would be making a model of some sort that I could white box, as you said. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, when Al worked on Star Wars, that's why he had that guy, Carlos Garzon, help him. Yeah. Because, anytime you draw the Millennium Falcon, it's work, or C-3PO, or R2-D2. And, if you draw R2's proportions off, then he doesn't look right.
No. And none of us are Carmine Infantino, and also it's a different universe now. So, we're not going to get away with that. Yeah. No, that'd be something very, very unhappy. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess Lucasfilm, Carmine would not be a Lucasfilm approved artist. So
it seems unlikely. It does seem unlikely. I think at the time, I don't know how much there was between George and not like George, like I know George. I don't know George. I don't know how much there is between him and the approvals of things. So when I did, Brett, did you do anything for the Star Wars comics collection that they did? I see there was they were doing like 1 or 2 pages from different comic book artists. I don't remember if you were involved with that one.
I did some cards and I did some covers. And then I did stuff for the Marvel version of Star Wars.
No, there's Lucasfilm produced 3 big books, hardcover books, and one was and they just hired random artists from all over the place. Supposedly, the deal was that they were artists that George liked. Most of them, George had no idea who they were, but the people who put together the book knew who people were, and so. So when they approached me, supposedly, I did a handful of sketches for the piece, and George apparently picked the sketch he wanted me to finish. but to my knowledge, I don't know how in the comics how close he gets to things in the comics. There's so many of them now. How could he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be there all day going, well, I don't like that nose and that head is, yeah.
Yeah, Jar Jar would never do that. Fire the fast.
Yeah. Well, Brett and I did some kids' books through the Star Wars ABC books. And they had this particular style with like all these different line weights they wanted you to do on stuff. And then but through that, you became an approved Lucasfilm artist. You had to be approved to be able to work on, which I thought was very bizarre.
Years ago, I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s, Disney was trying to rev up things. And so they were asking a bunch of Marvel artists to do Disney stuff. And I got a call and they said, we'd love you to do some samples. And I was like, samples? What are you talking about? Yeah, we want to approve of the way you draw our character. I was like, I'm not doing that. You hire me to do it. I'll do it. And, it'll still look like who they're supposed to look like, but it'll be the way I draw them to look like they look like. I'm not going to do anything nuts with them. I'm not a maniac, but I'm not doing unpaid samples for Disney comics.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys, and this might be, I don't think it's spicy, but I think we talked about this with Joe Jusko when he was on, about being at a certain level in your career where you're not beating the pavement trying to find work. The work comes to you. And I think the people listening, that sounds like ego, right? Like, oh, well, what do you mean you don't have? But it's just the nature of the beast at this point. Yeah. People come to art because they want art.
Oh, if I had 4 of me, I'd still have more than I could do.
Right.
And I recognize how fortunate I am about that. I know I'm very lucky for that.
Yeah. So I guess maybe a question is, do you find any difference in when you were, I don't know, hungry in a different way when you were a lot younger versus now? Like, I think it's cool that you get to pick and choose things and do things that maybe are fun that you hadn't tried before.
And but still, I have to be careful I don't get in trouble because I'm still a freelance comic book artist. So my immediate thought is always to say yes. Someone just I got approached. I mean, not only the opportunities I mentioned earlier, but there's a couple others that I was really thrilled at the prospect of, and I wanted to say yes to, and they were like, whether they were good or bad ideas, I don't know. But my first thought was that sounds like something I should say yes to. I mean, hopefully that won't turn out to be the case. It'll be okay that I didn't do it. But my first thought is almost always to say yes. Marvel or DC calls up and says we need a cover. I want to say yes, but I have interior work I want to do. So I've been drawing a line lately, and that feels super weird. It feels weird to be saying no, even though I know for the last 3 months I've been overcommitted, and I've got work that I promised it would be done 2 months ago, and it's still not done. And I don't want that to be the case. I want to be getting stuff done. Right. So it's really weird to be saying no in this last month because I have other stuff that I just have to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also think it's probably maybe generational too, because we can remember there was a time when you couldn't always get all the work that you wanted,
I think that's totally true. And again, I know I'm super lucky that the way things have worked out for me. But like when I first, like at some point, I think I was stupid young. I was probably about 24, maybe 25 years old at this point, and I had a panic attack because I realized I knew what I was going to be working on for the next 2 years. I had work lined up. And I had to get what I was working on done now because I had to get the next thing done and the next thing done and the next thing done. And I realized I was sitting here working on something right now, thinking about the thing I was going to be working on in 2 years. It was like, I can't. Like, I just totally freaked out. I called up everybody and quit on almost all those jobs. It was like, I can't do it. I just have to clear the boards. I just need to be able to see tomorrow because I can't see tomorrow. I see 2 years from now, and this sucks. Again, I knew how lucky I was. I knew that I was lucky to be offered that much work. And fortunately, that's been almost my entire career. I've had something coming always, even when at the beginning of the pandemic, I still had a ton of work to do. So, and again, I totally know I'm super lucky on this, and certainly appreciate that. But I've never, since the very beginning, I've never really had any problems with this. So it's made me think that's probably why I am probably the God of the universe, but a self-hating God. And
Well, I think there's a quality there that's applicable to that, because you always give 110%, and your love is so pure for these things that you're doing that jumps right into the audience's consciousness, and they become so moved and fond of it. And,
you're my new favorite, Brett Blevins.
I mean, that's why the publishers want you to work for them, because you're going to please their audience, you know. And that comes from your own intensity of spirit and just sort of honoring your vision.
I mostly think it's the Wolverine mask that's behind me.
What is your average day? Is it pretty much the same as it was at the beginning of your career? I mean, I know you have a family now, you got a daughter. Yeah. So how do you break up working at home and pacing yourself is really hard for some people.
Mm-hmm.
It's been weird, because certainly both Joyce and I had a bit of panic at the beginning, even though, I mean, we were reading in advance of things, even before things were getting shut down. We were starting to stock up on stuff, because we were reading international news and seeing commentary from medical people we knew that. So we knew that we knew things were going to be difficult. And we won't talk about the political part of it and why it's still as bad as it is. So we were in a sense, we were ready to get ready. I've lost track of what I was talking about.
I was just how your day is like. You're managing your.
So certainly, the first couple of months of the pandemic, I put on weight, because we were just getting ready, and they were like gathering up all the various food stuff, but maybe not immediately. So it took several months. So no, physically, I've not been taking care of myself nearly as much as I should. One of the things I do say at conventions when people say, "What should I do as a professional artist?" and again, I'm one of those people who does not follow my own advice, but I always tell young people you should try to exercise regularly and eat a good diet, and, have a good diet, take care of yourself, because companies will tell you that they need what they need from you right away, or the world will end, and you'll get that done. You'll meet what they need, but they won't always remember that. There'll be someone new working there who won't appreciate the hard work that you're doing, the sacrifices you're committing to your family or to your body. There's going to be a new editor who doesn't know you did any of that stuff and won't necessarily hire you for a job in the future. So to you, as a freelance, as a professional comic book artist, you always have to take care of yourself. Again, especially this last year, I've not practiced that nearly as much as I should. But that's certainly advice I give to people. So my day is, Joyce gets up before I do. Joyce has a lot of dogs, and we have puppies right now, especially. So the puppies get up.
Oh, wow!
So Joyce gets up earlier, and she generally gets up. Our daughter Alex, and she's been doing her school stuff, so make sure she's set up for her day in school. And then I usually get up, maybe 10ish, 11ish. I'm usually up till about 1 or 2 in the morning. Because the house, that's how, when I was working at home from when I was a kid, that was the quietest time, and I'm just stuck in that. It's just I've never really gotten out of being a little bit more productive between like 8 p.m. and 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning. It's just it's quiet. No one's going to call me. No one's looking for anything. So generally I'm getting up around that time, then do whatever stuff I need to do around the house, work in the garden maybe, and then sit down probably at the table, probably around 1 or 2 o'clock. actually get to working, and then I'll work for a couple hours, and then I usually am the one who makes dinner. So I'll make dinner for the family, and then we we sit down, do that stuff, and then we generally hang out for a little while, and then I'm the one who puts Alex to bed, make sure she has all the stuff she needs, get her hair brushed and all that sort of stuff, because she didn't start growing hair until she was about 2 years old, so her hair is stupid long now because she never wanted it cut because it was so difficult to grow that hair. So usually I'm the one who like brushes out her hair before she goes to sleep. And then I sit down and just get back to him. We're pretty much same old every day.
Art, you seem very even keeled.
I hope so.
And one thing that I always ask of the guests, and I think it's something that we're just not wired to do very well, is do you know how to relax? Like, can you take a nap? Can you just put your feet up?
I take a nap. Yeah, nap. So if I get tired, I've been having back issues for like the last 5 or so years, and so sometimes I just have to take a rest. I'll just go have like a half hour or an hour nap. My wife, if she heard any of that, would laugh because she knows I nap more than that. But so when I do have to nap, yeah, I will go have a nap. I can step away from stuff. I can stop thinking about the stuff. I don't really have any problem with that. I don't know that that's ever not been the case. And certainly when I was living on my own, when I was a bachelor, I was, building models or something, or I was, going to walk around the neighborhood when I was living in Oakland, California, go visit the comic book store and all that kind of stuff.
Do you do personal work that's just for you away from deadlines? Or is everything pretty much?
Even the stuff that I do as personal stuff ends up somewhere. Like one of the Ultraman things I showed you earlier, that was a personal thing. Just the monsters. I just felt like drawing the monsters in one big banner of monsters. But I showed it when Marvel was doing the Ultraman stuff. And they asked me to do some Ultraman covers. I said, well, sure, I'd love to do that. I love Ultraman since I was a little boy. But I'm also working on this. Do you have any interest in this? And they said, well, sure. So the thing that was kind of a personal odd bit of nonsense, those are going to be covers. And that's kind of the comic book cover recreations. That's one of the things I do that make me feel the most about like when I was a little boy buying comics, because it's just me spending time with those silly old comics, and then me, like whoever drew the original cover, Gil Kane or John Buscema or Jack Kirby, I'm sure they drew those in an afternoon and got on with their life. But I'll spend a week working on those things, and I couldn't be happier. That's just stupid fun for me. Fortunately, it turns out to be occasionally kind of lucrative fun. There was several years ago, shortly after Alex was born, maybe a year or two after she was born, I was getting a call from somebody who did a survey. It was a survey. It was around a political time. And I'd heard that mostly older conservative people answered the surveys. And that's why surveys often tend to lean in a more conservative direction. And so someone called to do a survey, and I was about to hang up on him. I said, you know what? I'll do this so I can make the survey lean in another direction, right? Or just be my tiny droplet in this storm of whatever it's going to be. And so I did the survey, and then the young lady who did the survey said, well, fantastic. Thank you very much for participating in our survey. You've won a prize. Like, what are you talking about? I've won a prize. Yeah, we need to come to your house and talk to you about the prize you've won. You're not coming to my house. No, I work at home. My wife works at home. We don't have time for you to come to our house. What is the prize? I can't tell you that. I have to tell you that in person. What are you talking about? So this happens over the course of we just need to come to your house and talk to you for about an hour. It's an hour? I don't have time to spend talking to you, and you won't even tell me what you want to talk about over an hour. No, we'll just come by. We'll talk very briefly. It's you don't understand. We work at home. Our house is a disaster. We'll spend a whole day before you get here cleaning the house. So no, you're not. You can't come to our house. Look, can we just come to your front door? We'll just talk for 5 minutes. No, we have stuff to do. Just tell me what the prize is. all right, we just want to come to your house to talk to you about your retirement. I just started laughing. It's like, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm doing now the same thing I've been doing since I was 3 years old. What am I retiring from? I can't imagine there'll be a day. I mean, if something physical would happen to me, hopefully not. But if something physical were to happen to me, that might stop me from drawing. But I can't imagine anything else would.
That's great.
Wow, will they give you that big giant clearance giveaway check with Ed McMahon? Brings that to your house.
I would have done that because he would have had to come back from the dead, and that would have been worth seeing.
Zombie Ed McMahon.
He came back from the dead just for you.
With balloons, that'd be funny.
And Dick Clark.
Yo, we're going to wrap this up. Art, we had a great time talking to you. As I say every week.
Did, Jamar.
Where'd the time go? 2 hours have expired.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was great. Thank you.
This has been great. Art, I'm going to put your Instagram on the thing so people can follow you. I want
to get this in. It's been a few years since I've seen her. Alex may not remember me, but please give her a hug for me tonight. Just love.
I totally will. You're a nice man. Is there a nicer man in the world than Brett Blevins?
I don't think so.
No, I can't. It's unimaginable.
No. Well, all right. We're gonna. I'm sorry. All right, go ahead. Say it again.
No, and Brett draws the cutest girls.
That's true.
That is very true.
Never been able to do them as cute as Brett. Very jealous.
Well, thank you, Art.
So I'm going to start our goodbyes. I want to thank you so much, Art Adams, for coming on the podcast. Art, I hope that you will visit us again soon. Brett's good seeing you, buddy. Mike, thank you so much. For everybody that this was our biggest viewership so far. So thanks, Art.
Holy smokes. I'll put a stop to that.
Yeah, you popped our numbers tonight.
Yeah.
So
you can do something right before you leave that will just tank it.
Sure.
Oh, no. So just a quick plug for next week. We're going to have a boot camp. So we'll let you know more about that as it gets closer to next Wednesday. Art, hang out with us. We're going to say our goodbyes. You can just play along. It's fun. So thank you guys all so much for your questions. We tried to get to as many as we could, but I think we did a good job in making a nice flow of conversation with Brett, Art, Mike, and myself. If you're new to the channel, I hope you hang around. This is the kind of content we do every week. Every week, you guys. So you get on the bus, like, subscribe, smash that alert button so you can get informed. No pressure. All right. So for Mike, Brett, and Art, this has been Pencil to Pencil. We're going to say goodnight. And go ahead, Art. This is what we're going to do. You guys say goodnight and
wash your Kirby hands.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a good one, Art. There you go. Nice.
Well, a little bit of Gil Kane in there.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Nice. Oh, there you go.
I got my Ditko bins here. How about that?
Oh yeah, you got it. You got to get your Ditkos in there.
Yeah, I can't do that. This is the only Ditko I can do.
Oh, there you go. You got it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good one.
Good night, guys.
Right.